Man Up, a program dedicated to inspiring and helping men live lives of heroic virtue. And now, it's time to man up.
Welcome to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. We are broadcasting on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. I am Joe Stopulos, and today I'm excited to have on Devin Schadt on our Heroic Marriages series. You may remember him from our Heroic Fatherhood series, and also back when we were doing the Year of St. Joseph. Devin is the head founder of the Fathers of St. Joseph and international speaker and author, and we'll have him on the other side of the break. Let us start in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our defense against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits, who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, a life update on my end, which I've hinted at the last few weeks. And if you're a regular listener to the show, this is kind of that every 2-year update of, hey, I had another kid. Here we are. So we don't find out gender. And it feels like every single time we have a baby, I'm like, man, I can't believe people ever find out gender. This is so wild to have a baby and not know what it is and have it come out. So with that, just a word of encouragement. Don't find out gender. It's just so much fun to have your world rocked when the baby comes out. That said, we welcomed our third boy in a row, 4th overall. This is Christopher Thomas. Name for first off, obviously, we're on a Greek name kick, especially for the boys. James, Michael, George, and now Christopher. It's okay, I like the Greek flair for the boys' names, but also the name Christopher meaning Christ bearer. You hope that we can raise him to live up to that name, that he is someone who can bring Christ to others. He can bear Christ within him and bring the light of Christ to others. And then Thomas, many great Thomases, obviously Thomas the Apostle, Thomas Aquinas, St. Thomas More, many great Thomases who we have an affinity for. It's hard to choose one. I love all of them very much. So worked out well. My wife had a wonderful I say wonderful. Pregnancy is never fun and delivery is never fun, but as well as to go safe and healthy delivery of baby Christopher Thomas on the 15th of February. So head to a short break and we will continue our series on heroic marriages with Devin Schadt on the other side of the break. Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. Excited today to be joined again by Devin Schadt. Devin Schadt is the co-founder of the Fathers of St. Joseph, which is an apostolate that helps men live out their call to fatherhood. We had him most recently on the Heroic Fatherhood series that we did last year, and now we are in Heroic Marriages series. Devin, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
So before we get into it, I got to ask, has your life changed at all since Pints with Aquinas? How does that work? I mean, how many viewers they get to, listeners?
That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, no, my life has not changed at all. Give me a break. Yeah, definitely not a celebrity. So that's all right. I don't want to be, actually.
No, it was great. You had a great interview. Obviously, I love the format that Matt Fradd has there. Obviously, an extended your ability to dive deeper into issues. And it's funny because I've had other guests on that have been on his show too, kind of recently. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously more exposure than you had prior to going on it, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Matt's the #1 podcast in Catholic podcast.
Is that true?
Yeah, I think he is. There might be a couple other ones that are up there, but he's rated definitely #1.
Yeah,
so
good.
Yeah.
Well, that's again a great platform for you and well deserved. So, well, as we're looking at today, we had you on for the heroic fatherhood, which is clearly right up your alley, given everything you've done with your apostolate. Now, that said, marriage and fatherhood go hand in hand, and so today's really the series has been evolving. And I've had lots of conversations with some that are friends of mine, other people who are just in the Catholic world. So kind of getting the taste of, of a lot of different things. And, I think as this series has evolved, it's turned into, in my opinion, how do we not just live marriage, but live epic marriages? How do we truly enjoy this sacrament of marriage? So let's talk about yours. Let's talk about yours first.
Talk about my marriage.
How long have you been married? Give us the rundown.
I've been married almost 30 years now.
All right, beautiful. And you have 5 daughters, if I remember from last time, right?
That's right. 5 daughters, a miscarriage in the beginning, but 5 daughters who are alive. Yep.
How many years from getting married till you had your first kid?
Let's see. We were married. Yeah. So I think it's 3 years.
Okay. So
yeah, 3 years.
okay.
Yeah. So we were right in the throw of things. And then we had 3 and 3 years, basically.
Yeah, that's people always ask what's the hardest. I said, well, how long's your span? Because 3 and 3 years is hard. If you have your 3 and your oldest is 10, it's like, well, it's not that different. 3 and 3 is a lot. So what was your guys' faith life like when you were first married?
So when I had just had a conversion at 24, a massive kind of like, I guess you could call it a God event, where God literally busted into my life and showed me that I was definitely going to go to hell, that I was definitely off track, and applied great mercy to me. So that conversion experience was what actually won my wife back. And that's a story for another time. But she decided that she wanted to get back with me. And then we were married, but she went to Catholic school her whole life. I did not. And so as I was discovering the faith, because I had shopped around at churches, Lutheran churches, Methodist churches, Moody Bible Institute, that kind of stuff, trying to figure out where is the truth. And then I landed back in the Catholic Church. She had been raised Catholic, went to Catholic schools. And I remember asking her, I started going to daily mass. I'm like, what do you believe about the Eucharist? And she was like, well, I mean, it's a symbol of Jesus's body and blood. And I'm like, no. It's not a symbol. You went to 12 years of Catholic school and you were taught, or you believed, as a symbol. So we had a big conversation, and it was that kind of discussion, those kind of discussions, that led us far deeper into the truth of the church, the truth of the sacraments, the truth of Jesus Christ, and the truth of his holy church. So it was like from that point on, we started to embrace our faith and truly try to live it. But one of the most difficult things we found in marriage was the realm of sexuality, the realm of contraception, the realm of NFP, all of that stuff. That was very difficult, primarily because of me, because I had high testosterone. I was a man who was bound by lust. I saw marriage as a release for lust rather than a remedy for it. And so when our third child was born, emergency C-section. She was born at 28 weeks premature. My wife was cut with a bikini cut cesarean section, but also vertically through her column of muscles in her stomach, because her uterus was contracting on Anna Marie and literally crushing the child. So they had to open her up fourfold, just open her up and extract the child out. And I watched it. I watched the whole thing. It was gruesome. Women are amazing. My wife was literally cruciform on that bed, strapped down, giving birth to Anna Marie.
Oh,
yeah. But it was after that the OB told my wife, said, you can't get pregnant for like at least a year. You're going to be risking hemorrhaging. You could potentially die. And so immediately I was the weapon. And so being a man bound by lust, a man full of testosterone, a man who had a very hot wife, I thought, and I do. But I just had a lot to deal with. And it was in discovering JP2's, John Paul II's theology of the body, where I encountered what it means to be a real man. And if I could sum it up, the real man is the one who assumes sacrificial responsibility for those whom he loves. And so he sets the pace of self-giving love. He goes first. He initiates in order that that person will experience Christ's love through him. And then if that person reciprocates, great. But if not, but in the process, I learned, I don't know if you want to chime in here. I don't want to ramble.
I'm along for the ride. This is great.
Okay. So in the process, I learned to deal with lust. That was a big game changer for me. And grace, you have to rely on Jesus Christ. You have to rely on grace, and you have to understand your identity as a son of the Father to unlock that grace. Trust is the essence of sonship. However, it was in our marriage where I realized where we were falling apart. Our marriage went under massive duress. In fact, because of this, that abstinence, because we refused to contracept because we knew the church's teaching. But she was so fearful of having intercourse for fear of becoming pregnant that even NFP was just off the table. So we were trying to do things. We were trying to come to the center, but it was very difficult, a lot of tension. And finally, in a moment of weakness, I had decided that I was leaving. I could not take any more. And because I asked her, could we go to counseling? Could we do whatever? Could we talk to priests? Could we deal with this? And it was, no, we got this. and we didn't have it. And so she went to the store with 3 kids. At that time, no cell phones. We lived in the Middle Ages, and I packed my bag and I was leaving. I was going to my friend's house, and she came back. She forgot the grocery list. And as I was walking out the front door with the bag, and she goes like, "What the H what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I can't take it anymore." So she goes, "I'll do whatever it takes. Let's have Father so-and-so over tonight." So we called Father so-and-so. He came over to our house, sat down at our table, and he said, "Oh, this is easy. You guys have already given God 3 beautiful children, and Humanae Vitae, he makes this provision that you can use contraception and everything will be just fine." And my wife and I looked at each other, and for like the first time in 3 years, we agreed on something. We agreed to disagree with this priest. And then he started backpedaling. And so it was like I was going to daily mass, and that was my only sustenance. I think that's how I remained in that marriage, because the true man was giving himself to this boy of a man to try to get me to be a real man. And it's real. That power is real. But there was a guy who's standing off the side of the road as I was walking to St. Anthony's, where your dad used to go to mass. Yeah. And he's like, "Hey, you, come here." Never seen him before. And I'm like, "Oh, what is this? Some kind of drug deal?" And he's like, "Come here."
For those of you who don't know where St. Anthony's is, it's downtown in the hood of Davenport. So yes, there's a little bit of background there. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So you just don't know who you're going to end up dealing with. And so this guy's like, "Hey, you, come here. I got something for you." And I'm like, okay. So I go over, and he takes out this big tape set thing that says "Naked Without Shame." And I'm like, "Oh, great.
Christopher West, right?"
Yeah, I'm like, pornography, great, like that's what my initial but that was when I started encountering the theology of the body. But what I discovered, what we weren't doing, so that launched me onto, how do I become a real man? What is the essence of a man? And it's reflected in his body. He's got to go first. He's got to initiate self-giving love. But I discovered where we were failing was communication leads to communion. And we all know that the number one reason why marriages fall apart is because of a lack of communication. But the real problem is this: couples don't know what to talk about. And I don't mean about sports or about soap operas or about what's on Netflix or about the children. We seriously don't know how to communicate to one another, about one another. And so my wife and I, we kind of came to this conclusion just through the process and the pain and the purification of all this. How do we end up loving each other? How do we have a great marriage? Like you say, an epic marriage. And I believe we have one. I love our marriage. We have date night every week. That is the highlight of the week. I love it. But so what is it? First, you have to know your own needs. Men have to know their own needs, and they can't be ashamed of them. Men have God-given needs. For example, physical intimacy is a God-given need. God made us, designed us to want physical intimacy with our wives. We shouldn't be ashamed of that. But a lot of times we don't communicate that, and maybe the wife doesn't feel that same need for physical intimacy, and therefore she might see it as a perversion. Oh, all he wants is sex, But that's so anyway, we need to understand, first of all, our own needs, her needs, his needs. He needs to understand his needs. She needs to understand her needs. Second is the couples need to learn to communicate those needs. So like his fundamental need is to be respected. What does that mean? To be believed in. You can do this. I know you have this. That's when he gets that from his wife, boom. Everything explodes. Her first need is to be secure in love. And there's a million ways we make women insecure in love. We call them fat. We tell them we buy them a treadmill for Christmas. We goggle at other women. They want to be secure in love. Men want to be respected. Those are just the first 2 needs, right? God-given needs. But anyway, she's got needs. He's got needs. They both need to understand their own needs. Then they need to communicate them to one another without accusation or blaming. Like, I have this need, but you don't fulfill it. You don't give me this or that. And actually, when we're talking about sex, I need it, or I want it, or you don't give it. We got to cut out that language, because it's not about it. It's I want you. Yep. Very important. And so in communicating our needs, that's when we now have the ability, lastly, to address one another's needs without coercion, without manipulation, creatively, on our own. So if I know my wife's need is for quality time, say closeness, that's a fundamental need of most women, is closeness. Well, then I need to creatively figure out how I can address that need. But there's a caveat. Only God can satiate that need. Only God can satisfy. I can only address that need. But this is a beautiful thing about marriage is, let's say I have this need for physical intimacy. And my wife maybe her libido isn't on the same level, or maybe that desire is not as intense. And yet, because she knows that that's a real God-given authentic need for me, she on her own wants to address that need without coercion, manipulation, or invoking the marriage debt. And then I see her wanting to give herself to me in that way. And I'm like, man, she loves me tremendously, because she on her own has decided to address that need. And that's when our women see us addressing their needs on our own, creatively, without manipulation, conversion, boom, their heart was up. And this is the key to an explosion marriage, a marriage that is just incredible.
And I've said this in this series multiple times, and we do marriage prep, and it's not 50-50, right? It's 100-100. And it's even more than that, right? And I've heard, and I'm trying to think where the line was, but someone saying, foreplay starts when you wake up in the morning and you treat each other with respect all day long. Like, to your point there, it's both people giving of themselves 100% all the time. And that's how that reciprocating love happens. So you mentioned date night. That's your favorite part of the week. And, I think, I'm maybe talking to people who are, I guess it doesn't really matter what stage of marriage you're in at this point. How do you keep joy in your marriage? How do you keep marriage fun? And, amongst all, you have 5 kids, I'm having my 7th here shortly, amongst the craziness of it, how do you keep that joy in the marriage?
Well, joy isn't something artificial like that so if we go skiing together, then we have joy. Or if we go to the movies together, we have joy. It's not external. It's not an externally imposed reality. Joy comes from the internal. So joy is almost always rooted to or connected to gratitude. So let me put it this way. Psalm 37, God says, or the psalmist says, those who delight in the Lord, they will be granted their heart's desires. Okay, so if I delight in God, then I'll be granted my heart's desire. Well, how do I delight in God? To be thankful for what he's already given me. So when I'm thankful for what God has already given me, then I begin to delight in him. And then when I delight in him, I'm granted joy. And in that joyfulness, that thanksgiving, then he grants me my heart's desires again. It's cyclical. So how do you have joy in a marriage? Well, the first step is to be thankful for her or thankful for him. That's where it all begins. So what we do in marriage is we become ungrateful for the other. We only see the blind spots. We only see their blind spots. We only see the negative things they're doing or how they're not fulfilling our needs. And so that's where we get entrenched in bitterness and resent, and we distance ourselves. And we never talk about that, right? Really, like without accusation or blame. So the key is the first step is to find those aspects of your spouse that you truly are grateful for. And then you develop a little laundry list, and then you pray to God about that. You thank God for those attributes, those behaviors, those things about your spouse that you are thankful for. Because, for example, you might hate your spouse for many reasons, but yet your spouse is slaving to bring home money for the family. That is something you can be thankful for. Or like today, I had to snowblow our driveway, right? My wife isn't going to do it. She could be thankful for that. So all I'm saying is once we go to God with our list of thanksgiving for what these attributes or behaviors in our spouse, then this is where it gets good, is then I learn to communicate that to my wife, or my wife communicates that to me. And in that thanksgiving, that appreciation for one another, both of them say, oh, wait, she sees me. He sees me. And then it moves into remembering. Hey, babe, I got you this. I was thinking of you at the store. Oh, he remembers me. He thinks about me. So it's thanksgiving leads to remembering, and all this leads to joy. The joy comes from gratitude. It comes from poverty of spirit. So I got a question for everybody is imagine your life without your spouse. Just imagine it. Right now, it just happens. Right now, husband has a heart attack. The wife gets hit by a car, whatever. It's over. Okay. So you're in poverty. You're in poverty of a relationship. I remember when I was at a monastery. I was meeting with my spiritual director. He was the prior, and I was all upset because I was posting YouTube videos and they weren't doing very well. And he's like, He's like, you don't have joy because you lack poverty of spirit. And I'm like, or poverty. And I'm like, I don't understand, and like he tried to explain it to me and it didn't make sense. And he said, anyway, dinner self-serve. Before adoration, just go in the refrigerator and you find some food that the brothers have in there. Well, if you know anything about a monastery, it's just like the food doesn't resemble anything. It's like crazy. So I finally find like these skewered toothpicks with cheese cubes and salami on them and like a shriveled up olive and tomato. Like they look like they're dehydrated almost. I'm like, well, that looks like food. I'll just eat those. But I hate olives. So as I was praying over this meal, I'm considering I'm going to throw the olives in the trash can in the refectory kitchen and bury them so the monks don't see them, because they'll probably kill me if they see them. And as I was praying, I realized I'm supposed to be thankful for the olives that I hate. And if I was a beggar, if even a crusty old piece of bread or that olive was sitting on the road, I would be so thankful for that, right? And so what did I do? I thanked God for it, and then I ate the olives. And then the joy came in. I hated the olives. I ate them, yet the joy came in. Why? Because I was thankful, and I received the gift, because in my poverty, I wouldn't have had it otherwise, right? And that's why I think in marriage is like, man, imagine even if your spouse is a jerk or you're struggling with your spouse, there's so many good aspects about your spouse that you can be thankful for, because in your poverty without that spouse, you would not be the person that you could be.
Yeah. No, I think that comes back to this idea of selflessness, right? So this idea of putting the other person first. And I think you really see this, especially in end-of-life situations, when one person's either they're physically crippled or they're mentally handicapped. And when you see that, like, I don't want to use the movie The Notebook. I've never actually seen it, but I know the concept of like the guy every day they have to go and help him remember who this person is. But like when you see that, you see the heroic nature of marriage. I think the hard part for us, especially if you have two able-bodied, healthy people, is the inclination to be selfish comes in, because we're naturally selfish people. And so it's those marriages that have two people who are ardently trying to be selfless to the other, to give the other their due, is really when you see the joy of marriage lived out perfectly. So, all right, we have to head to a short break. Can I hold you around for a quick 2 minutes afterwards? I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
We're going to head to a short break, and we'll be right back.
My help comes from you. You're right here.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. As you guys heard, Devin has lots of great knowledge here. I have more questions. We have short time. So, Devin, in your marriage, is there something that you've learned from another couple or someone else that has inspired you to live out a better marriage?
Yeah. So there was this woman, Mickey Oliger, and she was like a second mom to me, and her husband died right before their 50th anniversary. And I asked her what the secret to their marriage was. And she had a couple things, but the one that stuck out to me was weekly date night. And they had 9 kids. And she said when Jim would come home and say, babe, let's go, man, she'd whip off that apron, forget to kiss the kids. And she was in the car, and it was her favorite night of the week. And my wife and I, we were struggling at that time, and we were below the poverty line. We didn't have hardly any money. And yet we figured out a way to do this.
Wow. And
that was the life changer, because like, it changed our marriage totally, because even if we were fighting, it forced us to sit down with one another. And I'm telling you, one time we were out at this pub outside eating, and we got in an argument, and my wife called me a Nazi, and she just like left, and she walked down the road, and she was gone, and I had to pay the ticket, and I had to drive after her and try to hunt her down. But it forced us to work through it. And fortunately, most date nights are not like that.
Yeah, most date nights don't end like that, hopefully. Yeah.
But I have an article on our Fathers of St. Joseph website called Validating Your Wife, and it gives you the tips on how to actually make a date night weekly, and the excuses guys make, but how to overcome those excuses. And I'm telling you what, you do this, you'll invigorate your marriage. It's almost impossible that you won't if you do it. And the other thing I would say is bless your wife, guys. Every night, bless your wives. Make the sign of the cross over her forehead. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine kindly upon you. May the Lord grant you his favor, his blessing. May you become a holy living saint, that you may behold him face to face for all eternity. And kiss your wife. But look at her eyes when you're saying this, man. Bless her. Look at her in the eyes. All you have to do is trace the sign of the cross really over her forehead and claim her for Christ. But in that moment, you become the face and the voice and the touch of the divine bridegroom that she so desperately needs.
Devin, this is awesome, man. I appreciate your time today, man. This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. You can also check out his work, Fathers of St. Joseph .org. There it is. Devin, thanks, brother. Thank you for joining me today on Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. I am Joe Stopulos. It's time to man up.
Man Up, inspiring men to live out their call to holiness.